Good day, everyone. I am your reporter for today, Clady Maydi Saniza, and I will be talking about the issues, problems, and future trends in the Philippine education setting. And first of all, I would like to greet you a happy afternoon to my ever active classmates and to our very inspiring mentor, Dr. Filomena Montealto. Again, good afternoon. Now, let's start with a throwback of our Philippine educational system. When it comes to influence, the educational system of the Philippines has been affected immensely by the country's colonial history, including the Spanish period, American period, and Japanese rule and occupation. Although having been significantly influenced by all its colonizers with regard to the educational system, the most influential and deep-rooted contributions arose during the American occupation. It was during this aforementioned period that English was introduced as the primary language of instruction and a public education system was first established. It is a system specifically patterned after the United States school system and further administered by the newly established Department of Instruction. So similar to the United States of America, the Philippines has had an extensive and extremely inclusive system of education, including features such as higher education. The present Philippine educational system firstly covers 6 years of compulsory education from grades 1 to 6, divided informally into two levels, both composed of 3 years. The first level is known as the primary level, and the second level is known as the intermediate level. The pre-university education system in the Philippines is the K-12 program, also known as K-12, which covers 13 years of education from kindergarten to grade 12. It was introduced over a 6-year period from 2011 to 2017 to bring the Philippine education system in line with the rest of the world. Central to the K-12 reforms was the provision of 1 year of kindergarten schooling for every child in the Philippines, which is done before elementary school. Elementary school in the Philippines covers grades 1 to 6. Junior high school in the Philippines covers grades 7 to 10. Senior high school in the Philippines covers grades 11 and 12 and was introduced in 2016 as part of the K-12 program. The senior high school program was designed to bridge the gap between school and work. Local companies partner with schools to offer technical and vocational courses, and students can get work experience while studying. The senior high school curriculum also includes entrepreneurship courses to give students the option of starting their own business after graduation rather than going to college. As well as following the core curriculum, students will choose to specialize in one of 4 tracks: academic, including business, STEM, and humanities; technical vocational livelihood, including test the courses in cookery and welding; sports, and arts and design. There are 3 agencies that handle the different levels of the Philippine education system. The Department of Education oversees basic pre-university education. The Commission on Higher Education manages tertiary and graduate education, and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, oversees technical, vocational courses and middle education. Philippine tertiary education typically takes 4 or 5 years or up to 8 years for subjects such as law and medicine. Postgraduate study takes an additional 2 years or more. Colleges are classified as tertiary institutions that typically offer a handful of professional or specialized courses. However, although the Philippine educational system has extensively been a model for other Southeast Asian countries in recent years, such a matter has no longer stood true, and such a system has been deteriorated. And such a fact is especially evident and true in the country's more secluded, poverty-stricken regions. Nationwide, the Philippines faces several issues when it comes to the educational system. Now let's first take a look at the issues when it comes to the educational system. So here are the major issues regarding the Philippine educational system. Now let's tackle the first major issue regarding the Philippine educational system. And first of which is the quality of education. Grade 6 and Grade 10 scores low mastery level according to the article from Manila Bulletin. The performance of grade 6 students in the National Achievement Test or NAT has been steadily declining in the last 3 years, placing them at a low mastery descriptive level of the Department of Education. So, before 2016, the grade 6 NAT takers had reached the average mastery level, as the average MPS in 2013 was 69.54, and in 2014 it was 71.82, and in 2015 we have 70.88. So here are the descriptive equivalent of NAT scores: 35 below, very low mastery; 36 to 65, low mastery; 66 to 85, average mastery; 86 to 95, moving towards mastery; 96 to 100, mastered. So as you can see, the average MPS in 2013, 2014, and 2015 belongs to the average mastery level. But in the year 2016, the grade 6 MPS plummeted to 42.03, or by a gap of 28.85 from the year 2015. And in 2017, we had a MPS of 39.95, which also belongs to the low mastery level. And in the 2018, for the third straight year, we had a 37.44. So all of the 3 years from 2016 up to 2018, we belong to the low mastery level. Meanwhile, the grade 10 MPS of 44.59 improved by 0.51 over the score in the 2017 of 44.08. On the other hand, grade 10 takers were steady at the low mastery level range with 51.41 MPS in 2013, 53.77 in 2014, and 49.48 in 2015. So aside from NAT results, the Department of Education also revealed the latest result of the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where the Filipino learners placed last among 79 participating countries and near last in science and mathematics. So, PISA is a triennial international assessment administered to a representative sample of 15-year-old students to test their proficiency in reading, science, and mathematics. So the results of the PISA 2018, which compared the quality of basic education of the 79 member and partner countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, showed the Philippines ranking at the bottom for performance in reading and second lowest for both mathematics and science. PISA looks into the learner's ability to apply in various settings the knowledge they have gained in formal education, covering three foundational domains: reading literacy, mathematical literacy, and scientific literacy. So the Philippines scored 340 points in reading, below the average of 487 points of OECD member and partner countries, 353 points in mathematical literacy, below the average of 489 points, and 357 points in science, below the average of 489 points. So this is the first time the Philippines participated in PISA. Since it was administered in 2000. It was not imposed on us, but was the deliberate decision of Secretary Briones to signal DepEd's determination to confront the challenge of quality, to benchmark against global standards, and to take advantage of an independent assessment designed by education experts. So this kind of statistic is no surprise to the education system in the Philippine context. Students who hail from Philippine urban areas have the financial capacity to compete, at the very least, their primary school education. So what should have been done? There should be a revisit of the curriculum, analyze the least learned skills in that, and decide on what is really to be focused by Filipino students in order to provide them with the necessary skills to improve the quality of education. So when we focus on what are the necessary skills students need, we prepare students to become lifelong learners and independent learners. Also raise the standard in teacher education institution to produce globally competent teachers that will provide quality education to Filipino students. So when we produce quality teachers, we are rest assured that quality education will be provided to Filipino learners and improve the facilities of every school in the Philippines and make technology available to all Filipino learners. Improved facilities and the availability of resources will make the student more interested in learning. So the availability of the necessary tools that will aid to their learning will lessen their burden in understanding their lesson. The second issue that the Philippine educational system faces is the budget for education. Although it has been mandated by the Philippine Constitution for the government to allocate the highest portion of its government to education, the Philippines remains to have one of the lowest budget allocations to education among Asian countries. So in support of Article 14, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which states that the state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels and shall take appropriate steps to make such education accessible to all. Section 505 of the said article mandates the state shall assign the highest budgeting priority to education. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed into law the 4.506 trillion fiscal year 2021 General Appropriations Act or GAA, where the Department of Education was allotted 759 billion or 4% of the GDP for this year. But the Philippines continues to lag behind its neighbors in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN with regard to spending portions of its gross domestic product or GDP for education. Actually, these serious challenges to learning among our youth can be partly explained by the inadequacy of public expenditures on education. PISA estimates that government spending per learner in the Philippines is just 10% of the OECD average. So in 2020, spending on education was 13.5% of the government budget, down from 17% in 2017. Actually, the ideal percentage is 20%. Among our peers such as Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia, the equivalent percentage is over 20%. As regards spending on education as a percentage of GDP, the Philippines also lags behind our East Asian neighbors, which spend 5 to 10% of GDP on public education, compared to our 3%. So to be realistic, it will take Herculean efforts for the government to reach levels of expenditures on public education that approximate those of developed countries and even our East Asian peers. After all, quality education is just fourth in priority among the so-called sustainable development goals. So the first is no poverty, the second is zero hunger, and the third is good health and well-being, and quality education is fourth. So it is understandable that more of the government's limited budget will go to the first three priorities. So the third prevalent issue that the Philippine educational system continuously encounters is the affordability of education or lack thereof. So there's a big disparity in educational achievements is evident across various social groups. Socio-economically disadvantaged students, otherwise known as students who are members of high and low income poverty-stricken families, have immensely higher dropout rates in the elementary level. Additionally, most freshman students at the tertiary level come from relatively well-off families. So the average Filipino student today is sadly lacking in English reading, writing, and comprehension ability, except for those who could afford to go to elite schools where great emphasis is placed on the mastery of the English language. Students from far-flung areas also don't have the access to technology-assisted education that will help them become global learners. Because of the limited resources, students were not able to maximize their potentials and were not given equal opportunity to showcase their talents and skills. Lacking knowledge in using technology will limit the students in enhancing their skills and joining competitions like robots. And to address this issue, teachers in public schools should have more training, seminars, and workshops to improve the quality of teaching that they can provide to their students. So teachers should be able to be well taken care of because they are the ones providing education to Filipino learners. So international seminars should be provided to the serving teachers for them to observe and learn from other countries on how to become successful in terms of educating their learners, and provide more assistance to the serving but poor Filipino learners. Although we have a lot of scholarship programs in the Philippines, there are still a lot of deserving students who cannot and do not avail them for a lot of reasons. So the Department of Education should consider giving more of this assistance in the provinces and closely monitor their beneficiaries to make sure that they can finish their studies. So the next issue is the dropout rate or the number of out-of-school youth in the Philippines. So Franz Castro is the secretary of the Alliance of Concerned Teachers or AC, stated that there is a grave need to address the alarming number of out-of-school youth in the country. The Philippines overall has 1.4 million children who are out of school according to UNESCO's data, and is additionally the only Asian country that is included in the top 5 countries with the highest number of out-of-school youth. So the Department of Education showed a data of a 6.38 dropout rate in primary school and a 7.82% dropout rate in the secondary school. So the top 3 reasons stem from the following: hunger, work, and conflict. So hunger, because students will skip class to find something to eat when there is no food at home or at school. Work, because they help provide for their families. Students will stay at home and work on family farms or businesses. And third is conflict, wherein this probably is primarily in the southern regions of the country in Mindanao, where there have been insurgents disrupting life for the past 50 years. So, according to Castro, that the increasing number of out-of-school children is being caused by poverty. The price increases in prices of oil, electricity, rice, water, and other basic commodities that are further pushing the poor into dire poverty. So what is the dropout rate due to COVID-19? So as of August 11, 2020, the Department of Education noted that some 23 million have enrolled in both public and private schools. So there is this significant reduction from the 27.7 million enrollees in 2019. And based on the 2017 Philippine Statistics Authority data, 9% or 3.53 million of the estimated 39.2 Filipinos aged 6 to 24 years old were considered out-of-school youth. So of that number, we have 83.1% consist of individuals aging 16 to 24 years old. 11.2% were 12 to 15 years old, and 5.7% were 6 to 11 years old. Next is mismatch. So there is a large mismatch between educational training and actual jobs. So this tends to be a major issue at the tertiary level, and it is furthermore the cause of the continuation of a substantial amount of educated yet unemployed or underemployed people. So ano ba ang educational mismatch? So kapag hindi tugma ang nakuha mong trabaho sa kursong tinapusan mo sa kolehiyo, matatawag itong educational mismatch. So the next issue of the Philippine educational system is the social divide. So there exists a problematic and distinct social cleavage with regard to educational opportunities in the country. Most modern societies have encountered an equalizing effect on the subject of education. This aforementioned divide in the social system has made education become part of the institutional mechanism that creates a division between the poor and the rich. With the 2018 result from PISA making the Philippines rank 78th in science and math, one key insight from this study is it implies those tested mostly came from public schools. Hence, the crisis also lies in the fact that a lot of Filipinos can't read or do simple math. Indeed, it's clear that there is a class divide between rich and poor students in the country. Though this is the case, less developed states can focus on learning if it's covered in their top concerns. However, the Philippines doesn't invest on top-notch learning as compared to its neighbor countries. In fact, many public schools lack computers and other tools despite the digital age. So due to the COVID-19, education issues in the Philippines have increased and received new challenges that worsen the current state of the country. With the sudden events brought about the health crisis, distance learning modes via the internet or TV broadcast were ordered. Further, a blended learning program was launched in October 2020, which involves online classes, printouts, and lessons broadcast on TV and social platforms. Thus, the new learning pathways rely on students and teachers having access to the internet, which lead to the digital divide. So, the digital divide is defined as the gaps in access to information and communication technology between individual groups or entire countries. So this yet brings another issue in the current system. Millions of Filipinos don't have access to computers and other digital tools at home to make their blended learning worthwhile. Hence, the value of technology in learning affects many students. Parents and guardians' top concern with this are money for mobile load, lack of gadget, poor internet signal, students struggle to focus and learn online, and parents' lack of knowledge of their kids' lessons. So it's key to note that equipped schools have more chances to use various ways to deal with the new concerns for remote learning. This further shows that the contrast in resources and training for both K-12 and tertiary level for both for private and public schools. One more thing that can happen is that schools may not be able to impart the most basic skills needed. To add, the current status can affect how tertiary education aims to impart the respect for and duty to knowledge and critical outlook. Before, teachers handled 40 to 60 students. With the current online setup, the quality of learning can be compromised if the class reaches 70 to 80 students. So another issue that we'll be tackling about is the lack of facilities and teacher shortage in public schools. Poor facilities signifies that students are not receiving their rights of having a sufficiently available and well-maintained school facilities. Indications of having these poor facilities are non-working or poorly maintained public comfort rooms, lack of classrooms, overcrowding in classrooms, poor ventilation, unsanitary and crowded canteens, and more. So these conditions experienced by our learners across the country, specifically those in the rural and remote areas, impedes learning. And the following are the recommendations. First is the proper utilization of schools MOOE. MOOE means maintenance and other operating expenses. So each school in the country receives its own share of MOOE every quarter of the year. This fund can be used to repair school buildings and facilities as well as the purchase of needed equipment and supplies in schools. If the people whose hands are entrusted to handle these funds responsibly maximize its use, I am sure that at the school level, this concern will at least be addressed and we don't have to rely with our local leaders. Second is reaching stakeholders for support. So for whatever support that they may extend to the school, the stakeholders we refer to includes the Parents and Teachers Association, alumni, private organizations, NGOs, and other groups. So as part of our society, these stakeholders will surely have no hesitation to extend their help once they are tapped. Another issue in the Philippine educational system is the brain drain. So brain drain is defined as the departure of educated or professional people from one country, economic sector, or field for another, usually for better pay or living conditions. So the brain drain phenomenon is where Filipino teachers choose rather to work abroad than teach here. It's caused not only by the low wage at home but also the lack of opportunities for growth. So brain drain is persistent problem evident in the educational system of the Philippines due to the modern phenomenon of globalization. With the number of overseas Filipino workers or OFWs who work abroad at any time during the period April to September 2014 was estimated at 2.3 million. So this ongoing mass immigration subsequently inducts an unparalleled brain drain alongside grave economic implications. So additionally, Philippine society hitherto is footing the bill for the education of millions who successively spend their more productive years abroad. Thus, the already poor educational system of the Philippines indirectly subsidizes the opulent economies who host the OFWs. Now, here are the other problems and issues of the Philippine educational system. First of which is, let's have the first issue, the colonial historiography. So, most of the past and present teachers, book authors, and social studies consultants pay more attention to the history of the colonizers in the Philippines and not to the history of Filipinos. Mostly, this has been the case in the teaching of history subjects from elementary to tertiary level and will most likely perpetuate in the next generations to come. So the history of the Filipino people and the colonial history of the Philippines are two different topics together. So the next problem and issue to tackle in the Philippine educational problem is the internationalization of the division of labor. So to a certain extent, the Philippine educational system conditions its students to be skillful in arithmetic and computer literacy, fluent in foreign languages, specifically English and Nihongo, and docile in order to serve as workers of the transnational businesses of the advanced capitalist countries. So take the case of the call center phenomenon in the Philippines. Since senior high school students are designed to be work ready, many graduates tend to seek employment and earn a living than to pursue higher education and earn a degree. So K-12 curriculum aims that students can able to start finding jobs after they finish senior high school because they're equipped with different skills which are needed for the call centers. So it became a trend in the Philippine education students that some students do not pursue studying in tertiary education. They have already thought of finding an easy job and earn money for a living through call center companies. In order to minimize this issue, the Department of Education should provide all senior high school students career guidance to encourage them to pursue a degree rather than to settle in limited early employment. So through this program, students will be redirected and guided to properly choose the field or track where they really fit in. And the third problem and issue in the Philippine educational system is the emasculation and demoralization of teachers. So demoralization is a form of professional dissatisfaction that occurs when teachers encounter consistent and pervasive challenges to enacting the values that motivate their work. So it is a moral type of dissatisfaction that needs to be understood as a problem of professional ethics. So it can affect all kinds of teachers. Teachers who experience demoralization believe that the school practices or policy mandates that they are expected to follow are harmful to students or degrading to their profession and that their attempts to alter them have been fruitless. So, teachers more often than not are victimized by the overwork and underpaid policy of the system of the past and present dispensations. This leads to the emasculation and demoralization of their ranks. This probably explains why the teaching profession is not attracting the best and the brightest from the crop of students anymore. Expectedly, this will correspondingly result to the vicious cycle of mediocrity in education. So, demoralization reaches its peak when teachers believe that they are violating basic expectations that educators should embody. School leaders who care about improving teacher satisfaction and retention should consider incorporating strategies that address demoralization into their plans. So the very first step might be to determine the source of teacher satisfaction. One way school leaders can do this is to listen, recognize, and respond to teachers' moral concerns. So respondingly thoughtfully to teachers' moral concerns may involve facilitating discussions about what good teaching entails, learn what faculty members believe supports them or prevents them from engaging in good teaching. Second, becoming curious about teachers' resistance. School leaders can find out about the principles that guide teachers' work in these conversations. Third, inviting teachers to develop proposals to resolve or address value conflicts in their work. And fourth, sharing responsibility for difficult decisions with teachers. So for instance, passing or suspending students. Avoid passing the buck. So demoralization is a process and not a single event. And preventing and reversing demoralization entails that school leaders be cognizant of and recognize the moral commitments teachers bring to their work. So it means working with teachers to articulate the features of good work and to support ways that good work can be done in their classroom, school, and the Philippines. And now let's proceed to our fourth problem and issue on the Philippine educational system, which are the fly-by-night educational institutions. So fly-by-night educational institutions are those institutions that are not registered with the correct training authority, TESDA, Department of Education, CHED, or other relevant body as institutions of learning. So at the beginning of every year, multitudes of young people yearning for education flock to many educational institutions seeking academic registration. These young people and the families are often faced with many obstacles to realize them dream of studying in tertiary academic institutions. Obstacles range from limited space, affordability, distance, and sometimes bad planning from students themselves. These challenges unfortunately present unscrupulous business people with an opportunity to take advantage of these desperate, eager to learn young people. Many dreams get shattered and many families are conned out of their hard-earned money by unregistered institutions, otherwise known as fly-by-night colleges. So why do such schools attract students? They do come cheap and many are marketed as exclusive schools, but parents also consider the proximity to their homes and few people bother to go to the educational department to find out if the school is accredited. So, by any measure, the proliferation of fly-by-night educational institutions is counterproductive because in the long run, it produces a pool of half-baked, unprepared, and incompetent graduates. Alarmingly, the country is having an oversupply already, and some would even consider them as liabilities than assets. This case is true for both undergraduate and graduate studies. And to address this issue, Department of Education, specifically its schools division, should regularly monitor private schools in their jurisdiction to make sure that these institutions have the minimum requirements to operate like government permit to operate and government recognition certificate. Next issue is the culturally and gender insensitive educational system. So women and the indigenous people are almost historically excluded from the Philippine historiography in favor of the men, heroes from Luzon and the power elite. Women are marginalized and trivialized even in language of education. So take the case of the terms female lawyer, as if lawyer as a profession is exclusive only to men, and manpower, which should have been human resources or human capital to be more politically correct. Next, issue in the Philippine educational system is the state abandonment of education. So, in the name of imperialist globalization, the state, in an incremental fashion, is abandoning its role to subsidize public education, particularly in the tertiary level. So, this comes in the form of matriculation, laboratory, and miscellaneous fee increases in order to force state colleges and universities to generate their own sources of funds. So, ironically, the bulk of the budget, in fact more than one-third in the case of 2005 national budget, goes to debt servicing. Another issue in the Philippine educational system are the substandard textbooks. So some textbooks which are already in circulation are both poorly written and haphazardly edited. So take the case of the Asya Noon at Ngayon with an identified total number of more than 400 historical errors. Unfortunately, it is just one of the many other similar atrociously written textbooks which are yet to be identified and exposed. So this is a classic case of profit centeredness without regard to social accountability. So our government wanted to save the publishing industry, yet putting to compromise the education sector. This is an issue in the educational system worthy to be pointed out, and we in the academe should do our part by verifying the references that we use, being part of our responsibility to validate textbooks that not all that is written are accurate. So in the 2018 COA report, they also pointed some error in the textbooks and learner materials. So please have a look in slides. So for this matter, a recommendation of legislative means was considered. Republic Act 8047, or the Book Publishing Industry Development Act, which states that DepEd is confined to preparing the minimum learning competencies and or prototypes and other specifications for books and their manuscripts called for. So this provision prohibits DepEd publishing its own books as it would kill the publishing industry. We propose to amend the above-mentioned law and should require publishing companies to secure a review clearance certificate from DepEd before the production of textbooks and other references, stating that the book has undergone thorough content review from curriculum experts in the field to make sure that it aligns with the competencies of the K-12 curriculum. Conduct of review workshops of all learning materials to help identify and correct the errors is also a step to take. It is also a DepEd's role to ensure the textbooks being used in private schools may also be reviewed by the department prior to use. So we are now on the another issue on the Philippine educational system, which is the widespread contractualization. So in the name of profit, owners and administrators of several private schools commonly practice contractualization among their faculty members. Contractual employees, unlike their regular or tenured counterparts, are not entitled to fringe benefits, which consequently reduces the overall cost of their business operation. So job insecurity demeans the ranks of the faculty member. Another problem and issue in the Philippine educational system is the undue disregard for specialization. Some colleges and universities encourage their faculty pool to be generalist under the guise of multidisciplinary approach to learning in order to be able to handle various subjects all at once. But some faculty members have turned out to be objects of mockery and have lost their self-esteem since some of them were pushed to handle technical writing, general psychology, Filipino, and algebra at the same time. So this is prevalent among franchised academic institutions even if the subjects are already off tangent their area of interest and specializations. So, specialization maximizes productivity. As Adam Smith preached, specialized workers are better able to hone their skills, become more efficient, and require less transition time between tasks. According to the study of McDougall in 2016, proponents of specialization argue that sorting teachers by areas of strengths allows them to master subject content and spend more time on lesson planning. It may even increase teacher retention rate. So teacher who taught according to their field can give a clear and vivid knowledge about the subject. They can introduce a variety of teaching aids and that makes teaching effective and interesting classes in this special form are fully equipped with the necessary material pertaining to his or her subject that helps in creating the necessary type of atmosphere, and specialized teachers get time to make in-depth studies on their subject and always on the lookout of finding new methods to make the subject easily and eligible for students. Another concern of our Philippine educational system is, you guessed the icon? Right, it's the copy-pasting culture. So overdependence to the cyberspace has dramatically reduced the capability of students, even teachers, to undertake research. So copy-pasting has even turned into a norm among some students whenever they are tasked to submit a research paper or even a film review. Needless to say, plagiarism has already transformed into a more sophisticated form in the context of today's electronic age. So students, particularly those in college, are expected to adhere to rule regulations and code of conducts that stress academic integrity, including the prohibitions against plagiarism. By effectively addressing the copy-paste syndrome, many of the social problems that we are likely to face in future can be averted. Without the full institutional backing and commitment of academics, however, a culture that withstands and compensates the prevailing copy-paste culture cannot be achieved. So we have proposed the use of a sophisticated blended learning system together with carefully planned student assessments and the close monitoring of student learning to address the problem. So plagiarism and copy-paste syndrome avoidance mechanisms and procedures need to be integrated into the e-learning system and applied throughout the program of study. So e-learning modules integrated with a suite of copy-paste detection tools are required, especially for the formative development of effective copy-paste skills. So a complete suite of copy-paste detection and avoidance tools will need to establish in all educational institutions. Another concern of our Philippine educational institution is, so another issue that we need to look on the Philippine educational system is, right, you guessed the logo. It's a very familiar logo. You're right, it's McDonald's. So the issue here is the McDonaldized education. So the system, methodology, and even content of education in the Philippines are mere haphazard transplantation from the West. So it is therefore Eurocentric, culturally insensitive, and non-reflective of the local milieu. So this is based on the xenocentric or the foreign center premise that other culture or system is far more superior than one's own. So with this scheme, we therefore tend to forget our own culture and we set aside our identities as Asian, as Filipinos, embrace the Eastern way. So McDonaldized education, it is the process of McDonaldization that can be summarized as the way in which the principles of the fast food restaurant are coming to dominate more and more sectors of recent idea about the worldwide homogenization of cultures due to globalization. So this means that our curriculum copied or patterned from Western education system. So to address this issue, the Department of Education has a policy on CLI and a recommendation of the reinforcement of the contextualization, localization, and indigenization in learning action cells or LAC sessions. So LAC sessions could be done in schools or district where teachers teaching the same subject area are gathered together and discuss teaching and curricular concerns in this Slack session. Teachers can design CLI lesson plans. So how do we do CLI? I can still recall from an education program supervisor in DepEd once said in our lecture way back in 2017, localization and indigenization are the house of contextualization. So you contextualize your lessons by localizing and indigenizing. When we localize and indigenize, we integrate it in our lessons, the culture, food, customs, and traditions, tourist spots, names of rivers, mountains, and other things that are well known in the place of our learners' locality. So we are now on our 12th problem and issue of our Philippine educational system, and it is the issue of the problem of non-sustainability and non-continuity. So teachers, administrators, and publishers are all left in limbo whenever the Department of Education would come up with another totally different directive from what it used to have in a rather very sudden interval. So the case of the grading system, the time frame allotted to various subjects, Makabayan program, the readiness test, and learning competencies. Now, on our 13th problem and issue of our Philippine educational system is we have the poor regard for liberal art or education. Liberal education is intended to form a holistic individual equipped with communication, critical thinking, mathematical, creative, interpersonal, and intrapersonal skills. So this explains why we also have philosophy, languages, humanities, natural science, and social science, physical education, and even theology in our college curriculum, and not only our major subjects. So the curriculum is specifically designed to produce a total person and not only a technical specialist. True. Unfortunately, the desired objective is not being met at all since liberal education is regarded only as a set of minor subjects. So with the way these subjects are being handled, taking into account both content and methodology, students view the entire exercise as an unnecessary duplication of what they have already covered in high school. So equally alarming is the lack of enthusiasm and motivation exhibited by some professors to handle the subject, especially if they believe that it has nothing to do with the course or area of specialization of their students. Say, art appreciation for accounting majors or algebra for creative writing majors. And now to our 14th problem and issue of our Philippine educational system is education as a purveyor of myth. Education has been very effective in mainstreaming and perpetuating the social myths in a subtle and indirect manner. So some of these myths are the perceived superiority of white, educated men. Official history has as advanced by the Western point of view. So globalization as the only way to achieve economic development and stereotypes against the minoritized and the disenfranchised. Our 15th issue on the Philippine educational system is the further marginalization of the undersubscribed courses. So in the name of profit and as a response to the dictates of the market forces, colleges and universities prefer to offer more courses in line with the health sciences like nursing, medical transcription, and caregiving. So this is done at the expense of the already undersubscribed yet relevant courses like area studies, Filipinolohiya or the Philippine studies, development studies, Philippine arts, art studies, community development, social work, Islamic studies, clothing technology, and ceramics engineering. Our 16th issue of our Philippine educational system is the monolithic education. So, some educators, in the name of conservatism and for the sake of convenience, prefer the old style teaching paradigm where they view themselves as the fountain of knowledge and their students as nothing but empty vessels to fill up. So just like a banking method of education. So modern education has ushered in learner-centered approach to education from being the sage in the stage to just a guide on the side. It is a way easier for teachers to teach in a didactic strategy, but this method seems to lack practice and learner skills are not honed well. But this approach, as everybody knows, is never effective as a single approach in teaching. And as to solve this one, engaging students to concrete experiences or flipped classroom theory is one of the best ways to ensure learning. So in order to compete the vast changes of the global world, students must be adopted in both all the prerequisite skills and theories to efficiently make use of the theories. Teachers must take into consideration the integrating of constructivist approach in teaching, which enhances analytical and boosts critical thinking skills. Another concern to our Philippine educational system is the atrociously boring teachers. So as I always underscore, there are no boring subjects but only boring teachers. But at least we should recognize them because they still serve a safe purpose. And I hope we are not guilty of this. Another concern of our Philippine educational system is the excessive curricular content. So content overload is defined as the excessive amount of content taught in relation to the available time for instructions. It is often driven by unrealistic expectations for retaining breadth and depth of content within the allotted space and time. So breadth means the number of subjects included in the curriculum and the number of topics to be taught within subjects. So it means the quantity of the subject matter. Depth, on the other hand, means the degree to which students explore and understand what they are learning, or the quality. So when a curriculum is set to impracticable goals, retaining both quantity and quality, curriculum overload happens. So many teachers, specifically those from the public schools, express their sentiments that they struggle covering up all the learning competencies specified in the K-12 CG or curriculum guides. More so, many of them says that some of the contents are not really necessary. So how should our teachers and policymakers resolve this concern? One is by curriculum alignment. So curriculum alignment is a process aimed at ensuring coherence and consistency between the intended outcomes as specified in the formal curriculum and teaching method assessment tasks and learning activities in the classroom and work-based learning. So when we do curriculum alignment, we do not only enhance the curriculum but more so that we avoid gaps and overlapping. When we talk about gaps, these are competencies that may have been skipped, while overlapping means the content that are repeated from one level to another. Another recommendation is the adoption of the most essential learning competencies or MELCs. During the spike of COVID-19, DepEd practiced this MELC. Most essential learning competencies according to DepEd are defined as what students need, considered indispensable in the teaching learning process, to build skills to equip learners for subsequent grade levels and subsequently for lifelong learning. So on the other hand, desirable learning competencies were defined as what may enhance education but may not be necessary in building foundational skills. So moreover, they added that the MELCs will enable the department to focus instruction to the most essential and indispensable competencies that our learners must acquire. As we anticipate challenges on the learning delivery, new set of MELC's guides were designed for teachers where interrelated topics are fused into one. This step allows the teacher to prepare on minimum number of competencies as compared to the original. I believe that even after this pandemic, it is best for the Department of Education to adopt this set of competencies, as they say quality over quantity matters. And we are now down to our last two problems and issues in the Philippine educational system. And we are now on the next issue, which is the teacher-pupil ratio. Based on the data collected by the Philippine Statistics Authority, the records of Department of Education, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, and Commission on Higher Education, that there were 26.3 enrolled in kindergarten, elementary, and high school in both public and private schools, states, colleges, and universities in the year 2018. So statistics show that teacher-student ratio is 1 to 36. It shows that number of teachers is not appropriate to the number of students and is a bit away from the standard 1 is to 25. So this issue in the Philippine educational system must give so much attention to the government, because government should allocate more funds in education to build more classrooms. In order to reduce the class size, the Department of Education should also hire more teachers and assign them to the places that are in most need of teachers. And we are now down to our last problem and issues that our Philippine educational system encounters. And this is the issue, the limited support to teachers' professional growth and development. So most teachers attending training improve their skills. According to a study conducted in 2017 from the Australian Journal of Teacher Education, one of the reported challenges is lack of financial and professional support from the schools, instructing the teachers to attain one of the rights, which is the right to professional growth and development. Also, according to the statistics in 2019 done by the CNN Philippines, there is a low government spending on the teachers training, which makes it lag behind low Philippine ranking in PISA. So this is the program for international student assessment, pointing to a correlation with the current quality of education in the country. And to address this, we should make use of the RCTQ, or the Philippine National Research Center for Teacher Quality, which assist teachers and school leaders for the pursuit of professional growth. So as part of the ongoing National Educators Academy of the Philippines, or NAEP, transformation, and the Philippine Normal University, or PNU, have collaborated to better assist teachers and school leaders for the pursuit of professional growth. The director of RCTQ shared that the induction program will benefit 11,000 new teachers, and the research shows that an induction program can impact on teacher commitment and retention, teacher classroom instructional practices, and student achievement. Furthermore, RCTQ helps to align the human resources systems for teachers and school leaders in the Philippine standards and our teachers, or PPST, that comprise career progression, promotion, and performance management. Finally, we are done discussing the problems and issues faced by our Philippine educational system in a macro and micro setting. Now, let's take a look on the future trends in education. So, here are some exciting trends for the Philippine education and in the broader Southeast Asia, which we will be looking forward to seeing unfold. Firstly, it's the traditional and formal education, will be replaced with bite-sized training programs with clear pathways to jobs. So in a post-COVID Philippines, communities will move away from treating tertiary degrees as the ultimate signal for skill or credibility and begin prioritizing programs that help them land jobs. So with this shift, universities will find it more and more difficult to demonstrate their value relative to their cost. So this already began to happen in the Philippines even before the recent pandemic, where young professionals were choosing to join short-term skills boot camps. This transition is also clearly seen by the breakdown of education ventures in Southeast Asia. So according to a recent industry scan conducted by Holon IQ, workforce startups focusing on skills and jobs significantly outnumber those for traditional higher education or K-12. So as you see, graph, we have seen that there is much more on the sector of the workforce. Next is better mobile internet penetration and the rise of e-commerce will accelerate the adoption of online learning. So the move to online learning is the next phase for education, catalyzed recently by the COVID lockdown. In Southeast Asia, more broadly, this is most readily seen in the language space education with groups like Topica Asia, using online platforms to reach students trying to learn English. But these offerings will soon expand to other subject areas, and learners of all types are ready to engage. In fact, in a recent study, the TESDA online program in the Philippines, 74% of current users were low to middle income, with 60,000 or $1,200 salary per month or less. So this indicates that there is a willingness to pay even for lower income learners. However, according to the same study, 70% of the Filipinos who browsed a course faced difficulties with completion. So they cited three top challenges to their online learning. First is the internet speed, availability of ICT access, and the third is cost. So it seems like the problem is no longer motivation but rather infrastructure. So let's go first to the internet speed. The Philippines is reportedly the slowest internet speed in the Asia Pacific. So there's room to be hopeful, right? So because the current administration has plans to finish the first phase of its national broadband plan next year, which would enhance connectivity across the country. So several private players are also making steep investments in this, hastened by the COVID lockdown. Second is we have the availability of ICT access. So while desktops are difficult and expensive to distribute widely, Suite's digital report on the Philippines for 2020 indicates that cell phones are Filipinos' preferred device anyway. In fact, 97% of the internet users in the country access the web through their mobile phones. Even more astoundingly, 66% of these individuals have also made an online purchase via their mobile devices. So this indicates that Filipinos are growing more comfortable using their phones for daily activities and transactions. The last challenge to their online learning is cost. So there is a willingness to pay for online products, but the threshold is low. So if companies can bring down their prices with low bandwidth products, then users will be willing to shell out the right amount the same way they do for other e-commerce products. Next is we have the third. The real barrier to online learning uptake in the next few years will be a mobile payment infrastructure. So motivating students to try an online course and complete it may be getting easier, but convincing them to pay for it is another story. So despite them increasing willingness to pay, one of the biggest hindrances to more valuable business models in the Philippines is lack of a reliable payment system. There is a little to no access to online payment methods across low to middle income Filipinos. According to Hootsuite, 47% of e-commerce purchases in 2019 were still made in cash, and another 42% via bank transfer. So only 10% of online shoppers paid with credit card. Fortunately, with the rise of InstaPay, PayMaya, and GCash, perhaps there will soon be ways for learners to buy a quick online course just as easily as ordering food. Now let's proceed to the fourth future trend in the Philippine educational system. There will be a lot of startups that would venture into education. So ongoing blended learning setup is far from perfect, and there is a lot of room for improvement in Philippine education. Even those with access to technology tools have a lot of reservations about the current system. Plus, there are a lot of opportunities for startups to mitigate pain points of studying in the country. This includes access to fast and reliable internet connections and affordable certification courses that help with the employability of the youth. Now let's proceed to the fifth future trend in the Philippine educational system, which is there will be a shift to smart classrooms. Technology will play a vital role in the evolution of Philippine education. According to LG, one of the global leaders in technology innovation, that there will be a shift to transformative learning. As cities and households embrace smart technology, so too will the Philippine education. A great example of this is the use of interactive screens, which paves the way towards making the physical and virtual classrooms active learning spaces. Smart classrooms are not only technologically advanced but environment friendly as well, which is a great step in the direction of a more progressive and sustainable education system. And now let's proceed to our sixth future trend in the Philippine educational system, which is that there will be a rise in innovative financing models for students to avail of non-traditional education programs. So already there are two big players in the student financing space in the Philippines, Focus and Invested. So both of these organizations provide student-friendly loans and services for traditional higher educational institutions and are beginning to experiment with providing funding for other types of programs also. So and then I'll predict that there will be a more of an appetite to move away from regular type-based repayment loans based on a set interest rate to income contingent loans, similar to those offered by Alumni and Better Future Forward in the USA. ICLs allow for payment arrangement that best matches for the student's ability to pay in their portion to their income, shifting the risk from the student to the investor. So an example of this is the income share agreement, which is a financing tool through which students and funding organizations enter into a contract where the organization pays for the student's education now and in return for a portion of the student's income in the future. Oftentimes, these conditions are set from the very beginning in terms of income percentage and payback period. Example of this is students have to pay 10% of their salary for 5 years after they graduate. So in some cases, the organization also sets a floor for the student, indicating that they do not need to pay if they are unemployed or earning beneath a specific salary threshold. So innovative funding models like this will be crucial for learners, especially if the end payoff of securing a job is much clearer. And to our last and the seventh future trend in the Philippine education is that the education will be one of the hottest industries to tap in for startup and venture capital players. In just the last 5 years, there has been 480 million in venture capital funding directed to 200 individual investments for education technology in Southeast Asia. So expert analysis says that this trend is likely to continue, especially as the region sees productive leaps in its digitization, both from an infrastructure and consumer behavior perspective. More importantly, users will begin to see the real value of non-traditional education badges and certificates and be willing to invest in these alternatives rather than typical universities. Change is inevitable and constant, and in order to remain relevant in the post-COVID world, the Philippine education system will have to adapt to the times, and there is a need to shake things up for the youth to be employable and globally competitive. Technology will play a key role in this dramatic change, and new thinking will be required to adopt the new normal life post-COVID-19. Let's quote this from an OECD Future of Education and Skills 2030 resource paper that in crisis, it is acceptable to have more questions than answers. And in crisis, there's no room for not invented here. In crisis, we should all be learners. Never stop learning because life never stops. This is the challenge, and I think the opportunity is now to start the process of thinking about a new normal. I leave you this message to all educators. My hope is that our new normal today exposes what was wrong with our old normal yesterday and sets us up for a better normal tomorrow. We cannot rewrite the chapters of history that already passed, but we can learn from them, evolve, and adapt. The new normal may even be a better normal, certainly a different normal. This is your reporter, Claydemidi Saniza, wishing you an advance Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for listening. God bless us all.